The timpani etude this year is from the Solo Timpanist by Vic Firth. It's etude number 18. This piece requires 3 drums, only 3 drums, and I'm using the 32, 29, and 26. I think that is where the pitches for this etude will sound best. There are a lot of articulate rhythms in this piece, so I suggest that you use these particular drums, the 32, 29, and 26, because they'll be more in the middle range of these drums. If you were to use the top 3 drums, for example, when you get to the section where you have an F on the low drum, that would be the very bottom of the 29-inch drum. Might sound a little tubby in that range. Therefore, because there are a lot of rhythmic passages in this etude, I suggest that you use an articulate mallet also. Be careful not to go too hard. You still want to get a nice warm sound out of the drums. Depending on your drums, the heads, and what room you're going to be auditioning in, you can choose your mallets from that. You'll have to use your metronome in a variety of ways for this etude. The first 3 measures, for example, you have to use your metronome to help you set up the triplet pattern. You need to count. You can clap and practice it. For example, you can play the first measure and count 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 3 lolly, and then measures 2 and 3, 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 3 lolly, and measure 3, 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 3 lolly. Make sure you line those up, increase the tempo little by little until you can be perfect with your rhythm. Immediately following your triplet patterns, you have some duple patterns that require really close attention. Measure 5, for example, when you have to play right off the first 16th note. So I suggest you pick different sections in this etude, set your metronome up, practice the triplet sections, then practice the duple sections, and then try to put some of them together. Later in the piece, you also have different time signatures. You have your 5/16, 3/16, and a couple of 3/8 measures. So again, pick sections, set your metronome up, work them together, work them separately, and eventually put the whole piece together. There are a number of measures in this etude that are missing the downbeat. You don't have 1, 2, or 3, for example. Make sure that in your mind and in your head you're hearing the composite rhythm. You're hearing that beat 1 even though you're not playing it on the drum. So for example, in measure 30, where you're missing the downbeat, but you have to play on the E and, make sure that you're hearing 1 E and, 2 E and, 3 E and. Following measure, you have the triplet rhythm, but you're still missing the downbeat, so you can think 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 3 lolly. You have to really be sure to hear those downbeats so that you line up the rest of the rhythm correctly. There are a number of rolls in this etude. They're not very long, except for the last one, which you can hold with the fermata. Be sure not to articulate the forte piano rolls. It's just forte, not fortissimo. You don't need to roll too fast, especially on the lower drum. You can slow your roll speed down. Always try to make the drum sing, so the head sings and we don't hear the beats as much as we would if you're rolling too fast. In measures 22 and 23, we have some metric changes. The 16th note is going to stay the same. So when you go from the 3/4 to the 3/16, continue your 16th notes in a steady, consistent pattern. The same thing happens later in measures 27 and 28. You end measure 27 playing a 16th note pattern. Just keep those 16th notes going when you get to the 5/16 measure. Between measures 33 and 34, you have a transition from a 3/4 time signature to a 6/8 time signature. Your quarter note now equals your dotted quarter note. You can start thinking of that 6/8 time signature as you're finishing measure 33. When you hit those 2 quarter notes, start thinking in triplet time. So instead of thinking 1, 2, and 3, and, start thinking 1, 2 lolly, 3 lolly, and you'll transition right into your 6/8 time. There are a number of measures in this etude that require cross-sticking. You need to be careful when you're setting up your drums. This is for the whole etude, but especially for the cross-sticking. Set up your drums so that as you're sitting up tall and your feet are set in the pedals, your hands and your mallets go right to a really nice playing area, playing spot on the drum. When you're approaching the cross-sticking, you really have to pay attention to that playing spot and try to be consistent, go back to it each time. For example, measure 22, the mallets go back and forth, and it's easy to overreach and change your beating spot as you're reaching across. Be consistent with your practice, go slow, and check it out. You can look down, memorize that measure, and look down and get it correct. The second to last measure, measure 47, has a more difficult cross-sticking pattern. You start on the G, you have to go all the way around the drums, and the left hand has to move back and forth. Really take your time with this, and again, be consistent with your beating place on the head. I suggest you start slowly like this. And really look down, memorize that measure, and look down and see that you're striking the drum in a good spot. Listen for that good spot also. So you can practice this etude at home on music stands, on some books. You can set up, you can draw some circles and set up at home. It's not going to be the same touch, so it's really important that you find time, you schedule time with your band director at your school where you can actually get on the drums. You have to hear the pitches, you have to feel the drum and the head through the mallet and practice the tuning changes also. Speaking of the tuning changes, they're not so bad in this etude, but you do have to practice and really be able to hear them in your head. We start out in a major triad, G, B, D. You can practice hearing these triads on the xylophone, the marimba, the piano if you have a keyboard at home, and then you have to change to a perfect fourth in the low two drums. This drum, the D, stays the same throughout the entire etude. Be careful at the end. We go back to the G, B natural, and D. You'll notice in the notes for TMEA that the B flat in the next line in the key signature should be erased. We do keep a B natural through those last 4 or 5 measures. So this is a very nice etude to work on. I think you'll enjoy it, but it does require some work. Make sure that you practice the tunings, be able to hear those in your head just like they're a song rather than just a drum etude. Practice the rhythms carefully, use your metronome, practice your rolls, make sure they're smooth, and take your time with the tempo and increase little by little. Good luck at your audition.